Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to do a sample presentation for my capstone project. So for my presentation today, I've got some notes. I'll keep my notes next to me for my presentation. They will be supporting me with some ideas through my presentation. I've got also a timer watch. Timing your presentation is really very important, so you need to stick to the time. Keep in mind that if you're not managing the time well, you'll be demarked for that. So I'll start timer now. So hello everybody. Today I would like to welcome you to my presentation titled Classroom Attention and an Empirical Investigation into Factors Affecting Student Classroom Attention in Middle Schools in the USA. And my name is Anas Al-Fatal. And again, this is a sample presentation for a project. So I want to introduce classroom attention. Classroom attention is one of the most important topics being discussed nowadays whenever we're talking about student performance in schools and the current problems teachers are having. So if I think about this student here, sleeping during class, I'm sure many teachers have the same exact problem. So in my presentation today, I'll be talking about the context, my background. I'll also provide some definitions. And then I'll be moving to talk about the significance of classroom attention. I'll be discussing a theoretical model. Later, I'll discuss the methodology I use to collect data and analyze the data for this study. Later, I'll be talking about the analysis of the data and provide some discussions with that. Towards the end, I'll be presenting a conclusion with some recommendations for practice. So I want to start talking about education in Oman. Oman is in the Gulf. If you're familiar with this area, it's bordering United Arab Emirates, and it's also bordering Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Education in Oman is been going through a lot of progress recently. A lot of nationalization effort have been done in this country in order to be able to create labor that's able to provide education for its new generations. Now, education in Oman is having a lot of problems. One of the major problems, for example, is the differences between what's going on inside the cities and what's going on in the countryside. Another major problem is skilled labor. Now, if I talk about the classroom itself, there are many problems there as well. That also, for example, relate to skilled labor. Teachers themselves with the practice, they're also having some problems. One of these problems is you find many students, for example, nowadays, they're not really paying much attention to the teacher. And for example, they're using their mobile phone, or they're coming to class tired and even sleeping in the class, or maybe skipping or missing some of the days of the school. So this is a major problem in Oman, and this kind of problem actually encouraged me to research this particular area since I'm here in the US doing some research on education. So I asked myself this very question: what factors affect student classroom attention in the USA? So in a way, I'm going to do like a comparison between what's going on here and what's going on there from my own experience and exposure in Oman. Nonetheless, this project is only talking about what's going on in the US, but part of my agenda, part of my research objective is like, I'm comparing what's going on here and there. So this leads me to my research objectives. I've got personal benefits. So part of it is like I want to develop my skills in making myself an agent of change. Benefit myself for improving my own practice. I also want to be an agent of change once I go back to my country in Oman. I wanna reflect my results and improve my colleagues and co-workers as well in Oman, and telling them about what kind of techniques or things, useful things we can learn from the American experience. And maybe I can produce like a guide that can help in improving students' ability to pay attention during the class. I'm sorry for the misspelling for the word guide. I hope you can forgive me for that. So if I want to talk about the literature actually is talking about classroom attention in several aspects. Now, when we talk about attention, there are different. This kind of area has been interesting for different disciplines. For example, psychology is one of the major areas in this. For example, you will find most of the literature actually in the area of psychology. You will find, of course, some literature in education. However, my observation from researching the literature is that I found most of it in psychology. So what is classroom attention definitions? I came up with two interesting definitions. One is from Betwawi, Bitewi, et al., and the other one is Tombay, 2013. And what I realized in the definition is that they're talking about the student's ability to cope or to keep online with the teacher for a certain amount of duration. Um, uh, this actually brings up the discussion about the attention span. I'm sure most of us are familiar with this. It's very much similar to that actually. Now, this area of research is very important and significant recently. Its importance comes from its ability to improve learning. Of course, if a teacher is speaking and the students are listening or paying attention, they would be learning. But if they're not listening and maybe like they're in a totally different world, that will be a problem and they will not be learning. So better attention will have better learning. And also one very important incentive for improving student attention is that improving communication as well. So since they are paying attention, they can have better communication, and consequently, they will have better also relationship in the class. Now, for my study, I searched for a theoretical model. I found some. However, what I understood from different models in the literature is that whenever we don't want to talk about classroom attention, there are three major dimensions or groups of factors. Some of the factors, they relate to the teacher, some factors, they relate to the learner themselves, and some other factors relate to the context. So I call this model, it's a synthesis from the literature. I call it three-dimension model, and I call adopted from the literature. Now, this model, actually, I used it as a theoretical model for my study, and it helped me a lot in structuring the research tool. I'll talk about that in a minute. So in my methodology, I'll say again my research question: what factors affect students' classroom attention in the US? In my design, I used a qualitative survey kind of research, and it's also adopting the action research. And this has been empowered by my agenda, and also supported by my agenda for the program itself. It's a teacher development thing, so I'll be carrying out some action on my way back to my home country. And the sample and the study side. My sample is for this study is not really very big since it's qualitative research, and also keeping in mind the budget, time and money allowed for this research. My sample is one school, and I also observed one class for six sessions. I also interviewed the teacher of that class. It was a Spanish class, actually, Spanish language class. However, I spent a lot of time with this group. It's not only limited to these 6 observations. However, formally, I only record 6 sessions. So as I said, it's a school in Southern California, and it's one of the best schools actually in the area. And data collected for this study was from observations. I observed 6 sessions, and I also designed a semi-structured observation schedule for that. I also interviewed the same teacher, and I had semi-structured also interview questions. The data collection, I tried in my analysis to follow a narrative analysis. And this was also supported by the Miles and Huberman data reduction and conclusion strategy. Of course, in my research, I took into account different ethical issues, for example, the informed consent, and also because this was very sensitive actually, since the research involves minors and school students. Now let's move on to the results. The results were actually very interesting and surprising for me in some aspects. In other aspects, they were very predictable. So if I start with the teacher-related factors, so what kind of factors relate to the teacher that can affect student attention? These are the 5 most important, actually, factors, and I also rate them here by, sorry for that, I rank them, if I could say, according to their importance. So the first most important factor related to the teacher is the kind of activity a teacher uses in the class. So the more activity a teacher can use in the class, the more you can get your students to be engaged and also paying attention to the teacher. So you need to think as a teacher what kind of activity you're using. Of course, the results show that the kind of activity that involve movement for the students helps a lot in maintaining, if I could say, student attention for longer period during the class. The second most important factor was warm-up. Warm-up is what the teacher does at the beginning of the class. So when the teacher does something interesting, something that can make the students really laugh and share ideas and get to be engaged, I realized or I observed that this kind of warm-up reflect heavily on the rest of the class. So warm-up were found really very important. The third most important factor is storytelling. Also during my observation, I realized how much attention students were paying to the stories being told by the teacher. And the stories being told in the session were very much personalized. So here the students, I could feel like they were a bit curious. They wanted to know more about their teacher and how he or she interacted with this kind of situation. So they will be paying attention to whenever they hear stories. This was also not limited to the teacher stories as well, but also like in the class with peers and also the self. The fourth factor was signals. Signals were very much helpful in getting the students back. So, and the teacher used several kind of signals. Sometimes he claps, and sorry, he or she claps, and the students will clap back. They have a kind of system that they establish at the beginning of every study year. Feedback provided by the teacher was also very useful. So whenever a student says something kind of performance like this, the teacher will be providing some kind of answer or opinion about whatever being provided. So if I go back and want to talk about this chart talks about the activities, and this summarizes the nature of kind of activities used in the class that I realized. So the most frequent was games. During these 6 sessions, I observed 13 games, activity games. And I believe this is a really very high number compared to my own practice before doing this observation. Next, there was peer work and role play. Group work was important as well, problem solving, and peer review. Now I'll move to the second group of factors, which relate to the student. So as I said, my model here has 3 dimensions, and the analysis follows the same structure provided by the theoretical model. So first I talked about the teacher related. Now I'm moving on to the second one, which is the learner related factors. So what are the issues or factors that relate to the students that can affect their own ability to pay attention during the class? The first factor was the eye contact. Sometimes students were giving the eye contact keeping the eye contact, sorry, with the teacher. Other times they were not. And I realized also during the session, the teacher observed was very, very successful in maintaining eye contact with the student group. I also asked the teacher about his belief in the importance of this, and he said he really, really stressed, or he or she, sorry, really stressed the importance of keeping eye contact during the entire session. And the teacher, sorry, mentioned that once the teacher loses the eye contact, the teacher should know that there's something going wrong with the students, and they should do something about it, like think about activity or any kind of technique that can help. Another student-related factor was the student lifestyle. The student lifestyle is that the kind of lifestyle at home, which can affect and impact their ability to pay attention in the school. One of the very important issues we can ask ourselves as parents nowadays, for example, is like, what time do my kids go to bed? What is the best time for them to go to bed? What is the best time for them to wake up? And of course, with this multimedia revolution where we're living nowadays, many kids are not really sticking to the healthy advice about sleeping times and all of that. So it was found that this is also a very important factor to reflect on students' ability to attention. The third factor was digital distraction. My assumption that students will be distracted with their technological devices, most importantly the mobile phone. However, I found that not any student have a mobile phone in the class. However, they have other digital devices like a laptop or a tablet, and these kind of devices, they might create a distraction sometime. And also the teacher mentioned that they will have to keep an eye on what students are doing on the digital devices in the class. The fourth factor is classroom interaction and participation. This also impact on the students' ability to pay attention during the class. So students are encouraged to keep more interactive. The fifth factor was willingness to work in groups. So teachers really need to think about techniques to encourage students to work in groups through their sessions. Now, the third group of factors is context-related factors. So what is in the room or in the classroom or in the school that can affect students' ability to pay attention? The first and most important one was the content material used. So what kind of material, teaching material you're using. If you're having something not really very much engaging for the students, you will not be able to maintain their attention. Second one was noise. Next was time of the day. For example, if you're teaching in the morning sessions, you'll be able to have more attention from your students. Next was layout of the classroom. It also affects classroom size. Of course, we're talking about the room itself and also the group of the students itself. Like a teacher would be maintaining attention for a larger group of students will be harder than a smaller group of students. And the sixth one was a classroom post. So this kind of post that you have in the room, they also might create some kind of distraction for students. But the teacher said that this kind of distraction, it's their job to make it geared towards the content of the study material. Now, in my conclusion and answering to the research question, there are factors that affect student attention. There are three-dimensional factors. Some of the factors are related to the teacher, and I highlight this in red because what my research finds out that the teacher is the most important element or dimension in all of these three. How is that? That is if when we have a skilled teacher, the skilled teacher will be able to impact on most of the factors in the student's in the student dimension, and the teacher will also be able to control their context and modify it into something that can make it can maintain better student attention. My example here is the classroom post, for example. A skillful teacher will create kind of posts in the classroom that not distract the students, yet get them geared towards the classroom or learning objectives. Layout of the classroom. Also, a successful teacher will think about how to rearrange the classroom layout. My recommendations from this study is that I recommend I recommend the Ministry of Education in my home country to invest in the teacher. Since the teacher is the most important dimension in all of this kind of equation, if I could say, so invest in the teacher themselves, provide provide training that can really get these teachers to be able to maintain longer or stronger ability of attention for our students. Um, so that's also related to training. The third is develop institutional policies that can support uh, that can support a teacher's ability to maintain attention. One of the most instant policy I can think about is that maybe we should have something to prevent or stop students from using mobile phones or bring in mobile phones to the classes. I think this is very important. And the fourth recommendation is a light effort with Omani nationalization's vision. So I believe when we invest in developing teachers' ability to maintain attention, we will have improved learning. And I believe this will help us in reaching the Omani vision of nationalization, where we will have well-educated and well-skilled labor for the future. Finally, I've got some limitations for my study. The most important limitation is the ability to generalize findings from my study. However, this is a qualitative research, so it's up to the reader to decide what kind of lessons they can learn from the study. And of course, the study had some challenges with the COVID and stay-at-home thing, so some of the data collection had to be interrupted. And I advise actually future research to carry on the same study, but in having more larger sample and also reach more generalizable conclusions. This is the list of most relevant pieces of literature. I hope you find them useful. And now I move to the final section of my presentation about questions and answers, and I'll be very happy to answer your questions. Okay, thank you. So that was my presentation. I hope you like it. Actually, you can realize that I was a bit not very much able to maintain keep the time. So it was 23 minutes here actually on my stopwatch. So am I going to be demarked for that? Maybe 3 minutes is a lot actually. So try to keep it. But maybe if I practice more, I'll be able to keep it within 20 minutes. Thank you very much for listening, guys, and I hope you find this useful. Bye-bye.